Hi guys, back once again with another top 5 episodes of, and this time it's my top 5 episodes of Airwolf. Now I've been requested to do this video and it's taken me a long ass time to get here. I know, I apologise, but it's here. Here we go with my top 5 episodes of Airwolf. But before we get there, I should point out that there's a couple of other things I should let you know. Number one, I am not going to be talking about episodes from season 4 of Airwolf. The reason being is that once they sold the show, they replaced the entire cast, and the show was just never as good as what it was for the first 3 seasons. And the first 3 seasons is really what the show is about, those characters. So once they changed all the cast and everything, it just wasn't the same show. Plus it was a cheaper show, it looked cheap. I feel sorry for Barry Van Dyke because this is the second time he got stiffed with this sort of thing. But yeah, it was just never ever going to make the list anyway. So it's pointless in even talking about it because it was never going to make the top 5 anyway. So that's that. Let's get into talking about Airwolf. Yeah, so Airwolf, the super sexy, sleek, super fast, armed to the tits helicopter, piloted by Stringfellow Hawk, a Vietnam War veteran that is technically he's holding the helicopter ransom while they look for his brother St. John, who is MIA. Now the funny thing is that when people talk about shows like Airwolf, they tend to bandy the shows that were made at the time into the same sort of pool. Like for example, Airwolf, Knight Rider, the A-Team, Street Hawk, they all get sort of pushed into the same sort of pigeonhole. And I can understand why on a sort of superficial level, but actually if you take a look at Airwolf, it's a very different show to those shows. For example, Airwolf just has a massive body count. Like, I was surprised when I went back and rewatched the show. Like, I remember watching the show as a kid and remember it being really cool and having it all sort of guns going off everywhere and explosions and so on. But I never really took into account the amount of people that die in Airwolf. And even by today's standards, you know, if you watch shows like Arrow or the TV show Lethal Weapon, there isn't the same sort of body count. Like, just in the opening movie for Airwolf, like 30 people die like that, just straight away. And that sort of level of body count doesn't happen in any of those other shows. If you have it like in the A-Team, you know, they firing bullets everywhere, there's bombs going off, all explosions everywhere. 5 seasons, 2 people die. Knight Rider, same sort of thing. Knight Rider is a pacifistic approach to this sort of thing as well, because Kit has, the car is covered in gadgets and so on, it's all defensive. There's no aggressive weapons on Kit. But with Airwolf is just like, yeah, you know, you're having it. And that's pretty much it. But yeah, really cool show, and I totally forgot how good the show really was. Now obviously there are a couple of issues here and there, such as with how computing works and so on, because these days we're far more computer literate than they were back in the 80s. But it doesn't matter because we don't exist in that universe, and therefore I can disconnect from that. I can take my brain out of the situation and go, computers don't work that way, and then I'll go, well, no, they do in this universe. So there we have it. Obviously the show as well being created by Donald P. Bellisario, the man responsible for Magnum PI, JAG, NCIS. Every time I go to my mother's, it's always on. It's always on. But he also did create Quantum Leap as well, so he gets a little bit of forgiveness there. And he does like to, when Donald P. Bellisario writes a show, he does like to include veterans in the show, and obviously this show, particularly seasons 1 to 3, is all about sort of the post-traumatic stress and the sort of condition of Stringfellow Hawk and his search for his brother as well. So it does explore those themes during the show as well, and it makes the show a lot more grounded than you were expecting. Yeah, it's a sci-fi show, yeah, it's a big action adventure show, but it does try to tell this sort of story as well. So yeah, there's a lot more into the show, and I think it doesn't get the credit that it deserves. But anyway, that's Airwolf. Let's talk about my top 5 list. So let's start off the list, and in at number 5, I put the episode Moffat's Ghost. Now this was a difficult spot to fill, actually, number 5, because there were a lot of episodes that could have taken this position. In the end though, I decided to put this episode in because first of all, it was dealing with the original creator of Airwolf, and second of all, it was an episode that was actually about Airwolf. It was actually about the ship itself. Not only that, but there was a lot of, even though there wasn't a lot of action in this episode, there was a lot of good character moments in this episode. You know, you had back and forth between Dom and Stringfellow Hawk, and it wasn't buddy stuff. You know, there was grit there. There was abrasion. They didn't see eye to eye. They would argue over how to get the helicopter fixed. Who was going to do it? You know, you couldn't just take it to the firm and just say fix that. You know, so they had to go and get a doctor. And you know, along the way there are a couple of little plot twists there as well. So it was a really, you know, really fun and enjoyable episode as well. The reason why it's this far down the list is that it's not perfect, and there are things that you could have taken out of the episode that it didn't need, and there are things that you should have changed. So you didn't need the premonitions that Stringfellow Hawk was having of Dr. Moffat and sort of Airwolf blowing up. You didn't need that. That was a bad thing to put in there. So that could have gone. The other thing as well is sort of the insane altitude that Airwolf climbs to. It's not possible. You know, it defies physics for the helicopter to be able to do that. And also, they decide to freeze the virus out of the computer system. And you know, people these days are far more computer literate, and you know that, you know, cooling a computer is actually only beneficial to the computer. And if you really wanted to get out of the system, you really should have turned the heat up, not down. But that aside, you know, I can still disconnect and say, you know, that's how things work in this universe, and therefore I'm okay for that. But it's still, yeah, it's a very, very fun and enjoyable episode. And that's my number 5, and it is Moffat's Ghost. So in at number 4, it's the episode Airwolf 2. See what I did there? Did you see what I did there? The episode is about the character of Harlan Jenkins, one of the major contributors to the building of Airwolf, and one of the designers. And basically the story is about how the firm have sort of almost given up on Archangel's ability to deliver Airwolf, and have decided to build their own new version using one of the original designers of Airwolf. And of course, like all designers of Airwolf, clearly they've turned bad. I don't know what it is. Why is that? Why do all designers go evil? What is wrong with that? They want recognition, you know, but the pay that they give you wasn't enough, clearly. But it is a good episode, and it's one of those doppelganger episodes whereby, you know, it's like Kit versus Car, you know, or you know, Data versus Law. This is a doppelganger episode, and they're always good fun to have. Plus, you've got the designer and Stringfellow Hawk going up against it, and his ego, the designer's ego, is that, you know, I can prove I'm better than you. I'm going to prove I'm better than you. Haha, you are no match for my brain power. And it's just a very fun episode. You know, the helicopter that they use for Red Wolf is a Bell 222. But it's sort of unmodified. They really don't do anything to it at all. The only time you ever see anything of weapons deployment is actually a sort of a close-up model shot, but nothing else. And everything else is just put in via effects. But it doesn't matter because it's still a good fun episode. You get some real good aerial acrobatics going on in the episode, and it's a real good bit of just nonsensical, sit down, switch your brain off and have some fun. And that's my number 4, and it is Airwolf 2. So in at number 3, I've got the episode Mind of the Machine, which guest stars David Carradine of all people. This episode, I put it at my number 3 because it's a well thought out written and well written episode, because initially as you're watching the episode, it's jock versus nerd. You know, David Carradine's character wants to prove that his technical know-how is better than Stringfellow Hawk's natural ability, and it becomes that sort of thing. It's literally jock versus nerd. But as the story develops and it's playing to those stereotypes, when you think you know what's gonna happen, it switches direction and pulls the rug out from under you. And as you're watching it, it's like, yeah, I know what's happening, I know, oh, different, interesting. And it does it throughout the episode as well, so it makes it for a very interesting viewing. I wish the episode was a little bit longer so it could have explored the story a little bit more. But obviously, you know, they had 45 minutes to tell this story and they crammed it all in. And even the end, even right up to the end of the episode, you think you know what's going to happen. You know, Stringfellow Hawk's coming in and they've got Airwolf and they're going to save the day. And the end of the episode, was this a satisfying conclusion? You're still left going, well, that's a bit of a bummer, isn't it? But it still makes for a very, very interesting and very well told story. So that's why it's my number 3, and it is Mind of the Machine. So in at number 2, and I got the episode To Snare a Wolf. And this episode is fantastic. It's just absolutely fantastic. You've got a character called Tony that shows up in it, and she's a great character because she's a great character red herring. You think the character's going a certain way, and you assume you go along with Stringfellow Hawk as an audience member, and you become convinced that something suspicious and shady is going on with the character. The story is obviously about how they're going to use satellites to track down Airwolf. They launch a satellite into orbit, and they're taking photographs of the region where they know Airwolf is roughly around. They've got its sort of distance of travel, so to speak, and the time frame, so they know roughly where Airwolf is. So they're looking in those regions, and Stringfellow Hawk is taking the helicopter and moving it in between satellite passes to hide the helicopter. Now, watching this episode, if you want to know how to put an episode together, how to study this episode, and it will tell you everything you need to know about how to budget, cast, and put extras into an episode to make it work. Because the first 3 minutes of this episode is nothing but stock shots. And as I'm watching it, I'm thinking, there's a lot of stock shots here. It's taken up quite a bit of time here. And the quality of the stock shots don't match the rest of the episode. They should have built a large scale model and done some new photography, but they didn't. And to me it was like, you know, they're just saving money here. And then when we go through the show, you look at the fact that there's only ever 9 actors in the show. You know, you got 4 main actors, and then you got 5 supporting, and then you've only ever got another 9 extras. So there's only ever 18 people on screen throughout this entire episode. And it's like, wow, they're using their money well here. You know, what are they saving for? And of course, you get further into the episode and you get some really great aerial photography and helicopter piloting and a lot of helicopter stunt work. And it's like, gee, okay, I can understand why, you know, they were saving some money. And then of course they refer to the B-52 bombers coming in, and then they cut back to stock shots again. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, they didn't have to cut the stock shots. They could have used model shots. They could have, you know, got new shots, whatever. But they didn't, and they went back to stock shots again. And then you get the episode payoff, and my God, what a payoff! I don't think, if you watch this episode, you'll see, you know, where they've been saving money and how they saved money. But then you get to the payoff at the end of this episode where the explosions go off, and son of a bitch, like, I don't think I've ever seen, in a TV show or a film, such devastation. Like you wouldn't even do that these days. You know, these days you'd have a couple of small explosions and the rest would be put in post. It would all be done digital. But Airwolf just did it. They took an entire valley and they blew 7 shades of shit out of it. And you've got to remember the scale of it as well. Like the sheer size of these explosions. Because they have to be, okay, they're only sort of dirt charges and, you know, smoke charges and so on. But still, they must have blown up a full mile of valley. Like, just blown it all to shit. It's incredible. It's a cracking, fun episode to watch. And like I said, the payoff is just jaw-dropping. And it gets a lot of praise from me, as you can tell, and that's why it's my number 2. So here we go. This is my number 1 favourite episode of Airwolf, and it is the episode Fallen Angel. This episode kicks all sorts of ass. It is just an ass-kicking fest from start to finish. This is a loaded script from beginning to end. There are no loose threads throughout this entire story. And what I like with this story as well is that it starts off with our heroes being broken. So they've been in a crash, Dom's in traction from head to foot, Stringfellow Hawk's got an injured arm, and that's how we start off, with our heroes being less than 100%. So that's good, so you know that it's going to be an uphill battle anyway. There's a lot of death in this episode as well, like a lot of death. There's just bits of body lying around the place, it's not even full bodies. People are just getting blown away left, right and centre. This episode also is good because it tells you how important the character of Dom is into the functioning of Airwolf as well. Because when he can no longer do it, Caitlin steps in and she's not anywhere near. You can tell when Stringfellow Hawk is piloting Airwolf and he's on about selecting weapons and so on, he just takes out for a sort of a test run and he's just like, man, you're just not Dom. You're just not up to it. So it's good. The other thing that's interesting about this episode is that because of the time period in which this episode was made, you forget stuff. Like we've gone along with how things are now, but like I remember the Berlin Wall coming down, and this episode makes references to East Germany, West Germany, the USSR, KGB, and I remember all that stuff. I remember what that was like, you know, living through those sort of times. And to go back into this, it's a great little sort of story. And using the villain of the piece for this story as well as being cleverer than what most villains are. Because normally in these sort of stories, the villain's got this plan which goes sort of here. And the heroes come in and they sort of just shear off the top of the planet. And that's the end of the episode. In this, that's not the case. In this, you know, they've got a plan, the heroes come in, and the villain's plan is actually that they want you to stop him. They want you to do this. So there's a really, really good sort of plot twist in this episode, like a cracking plot twist in this episode. And like I said, it's just all sorts of kicking ass, and it is my favourite episode of Airwolf. And I'm not going to say any more about it because I don't think I need to. It's just a fantastic bit of fun. Rescuing Archangel, brainwashing. There's so much that they put into this episode from start to finish. And there we go. That is my number 1 pick for best episode of Airwolf, and it is the episode Fallen Angel. So there you go. That's my top 5 episodes of Airwolf, and they are Moffat's Ghost, Airwolf 2, Mind of the Machine, To Snare a Wolf, and Fallen Angel. If you want to know what the worst episode I think is of Airwolf, minus season 4 obviously, I think the worst episode is by far Tracks. It's just a terrible episode of Airwolf. You know, it's about a wild cat man who's hunting disabled people with a bow and arrow and ends up getting hunted down by Airwolf. You know, guy with bow and arrow versus helicopter gunship. It doesn't quite work. On a villain level, it's just not great. It doesn't really tell a good cohesive story. The hero and the villains don't match up, and the villain and the victims don't match up. It's just really it's an episode to avoid, or at least to sit down and get a beer and have a laugh at. But anyway, that's my top 5 episodes of Airwolf. Let me know what you think of my list. Feel free to like and comment on this video, subscribe to the channel, or you can join me on Twitter. But until next time, I'll see you later, guys.